Welcome to another episode of Epigram. Today I'm with Chris Brown. I have to tell you, I think it's one of the first time I feel a little bit nervous because I'm sitting next to a podcaster, an architect, and also a yoga teacher. So welcome, Chris. How are you?
Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor. I'm really glad to be here.
So I tried to find a setting that you might feel more comfortable. I don't know if I did the right thing or not. But
No, this is great. Wonderful.
That's cool.
Uh-huh.
So Chris, I want you to maybe talk to our audience that is also a creative and designer-oriented group, that your background is in architecture, but also you have a passion for, a balanced life, in general health, just concentrated in three phases that you can address that.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I've always been a little unusual in terms of my career.
Okay.
I actually started out as a city planner.
Okay.
And got a degree in urban design, and then went back to school for architecture. But during that whole period, I was lifeguarding at the beach.
Oh wow!
And even after I graduated, I continued with lifeguarding. Okay. So I was working up in New Jersey in Princeton, and I was there for about 13 years.
Okay.
And every weekend in the summer, I'd be lifeguarding at the beach. And for me, that was an opportunity to, during the week in architecture, constantly in my head, being creative, working on, coming up with designs, and really having that opportunity to get into myself in terms of my creativity and express myself that way. And then on the weekends, I would go to the beach, and it would be get out of my head and totally in my body. I had to be in good shape because I had to rescue people, run around on the beach, very active. But it was completely getting out of my head and being with people who are just really about, being in the sun, having fun, having a really good time. And that was kind of the initial for me. Like there was something there in terms of being in touch with my body and my physical self on the weekends, and then being in my head and getting in touch with my mental self when I was working as an architect and urban designer. And I actually started practicing yoga because I was having trouble with my back, and my doctor recommended that I try yoga. And at the time, I was very much like, if this is some sort of, spiritual kind of like a cult type thing. I thought, like if they're going to start chanting or something, I'm like, I'm done with this. And luckily, I found I just went into a store, found a DVD, and bought the DVD and started practicing at home. Okay. And it seemed to me that practice, it was actually a well-known yoga instructor named Brian Kest. Okay. And so I started practicing with his DVD just at home. And it seemed to me that it was just about the physical practice of yoga. There wasn't anything kind of deeper about it. But then actually, the more I practiced that DVD and the more I went to a couple of his workshops and workshops with some other people, started practicing in a studio, and I realized that there was actually something happening more than just the physical in the yoga practice. So I found that practicing yoga for me, it was about getting my back and my body healthy, but it also became a lot more about the mental aspect of the practice, which is the way I think of it now as meditation and motion. So when I'm going through my physical practice, I'm actually working on my breathing, relaxing and calming my mind, getting in touch with my deeper self. And to me, that is really the foundation of where the balance in my life comes from. Not that I have a balanced life, but that it's kind of helps you to move in that direction.
That's great. So I don't know, so many things comes through my mind. One of the things that I find fascinating too about the discipline of yoga, that whoever does it kind of have they have a special language when they communicate with another person that actually also do yoga. Mm-hmm. And also it's based by experience. Yeah. It seems like, like if you're the beginner or if you keep scaling up to a certain level, that even that that what you're saying, that the element that is so connected with you and the other people that actually make it is so powerful. So I don't know, when you started just with a DVD, how this started scaling up,
Okay. Yeah. Well, I started with the DVD because I, like a lot of people, assumed that to practice yoga you had to be flexible.
Yeah.
And when I took my first yoga class, I had been practicing with the DVD for about 6 months.
Okay.
And then I went to the class, and I found a nice spot in the back of the room so that nobody would be looking at me. And I was assuming that, like everybody was going to be super flexible. And that wasn't really what it was about. I could tell that immediately when I went to that studio, there was such a warming, welcoming atmosphere.
Yeah. That
it had that feel that you're kind of describing, is that people just seem to have a lightness and a calmness and a kind of like an underlying joy to them. And not everybody there, of course, but it kind of had that feeling. So I felt like I immediately felt like I was stepping into this community that had something to offer in terms of getting that sense of like you're in a good place. Okay. And for me, it was important, and I think that this is kind of the most important thing about yoga for me, is that like when I started practicing, I was my dad died when I was 13. Oh, right. And it was pretty traumatic for me, and I felt like from that point on in my life, I struggled a lot. I did, like some things that, you do when you're a stupid kid that aren't so great. And my career, I was really kind of lost about like, where am I going to go? And, went to schools more as like to party than to, than to learn. And I really, like, once I got out of school, I really struggled like with like, in my teens, early 20s, I just my underlying state was of like a dis-ease and unhappiness, not really enjoying life too much. Like if there's a happiness set point, I was kind of on the lower level. And so because of that, I felt like there must be some way to change that. If I can figure out a way to change my perception somehow, then I could find a better place. And yoga was kind of hinting at that for me. So I got more into my yoga practice. I was reading philosophy. I was trying to find, like, I even got into, some self-help books and tried to, was just trying to find a way to get myself to a better place. And I think the yoga was kind of the beginning of an entry there. But it was really when I got into meditation, and then found a teacher. His name is Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's become fairly well known now. But I did a couple of workshops with him. And what wound up happening was I wound up having what I might call like an awakening experience. So it was... And I went for like years without even talking about this because I felt like people would think that I'm crazy. But what happened was I got to this point where I was just able to, it was like my mind stopped. I was out in Yosemite National Park, so a good place for something like this to happen. But it was like I was able to put my mind on pause, and I felt like...
No drugs?
No drugs, just,
just
like,
kidding.
No. Because, some people, have used drugs to kind of access this type of experience. But for me, it was like, I was scared. Like, I don't know, somehow I was like, because my practice and like my teacher was saying, like, just figure out a way to be present and let your mind quiet down completely. And I felt like if I did that, it was almost like I was going to stop existing or something. I was afraid I was going to have like a heart attack or die or something. But it was like my mind stopped and I accessed this deeper sense of self. It was like Nisargadatta Maharaj calls the witnessing self. So it's a deeper place of self that's kind of beyond mind. And and this is like trying to describe to like architects, right, or designers, like what the hell is this guy talking about? Trying to make it accessible, like trying to describe it in a way that's like easy for people to understand. But it's like I moved to a place where rather than being consumed by my mind and feeling like my mind is me, it's like you shift to this place where there's this more grounded sense of self and your mind is just a tool. So what happened in that shift, and it lasted for like a couple of years after, is I felt like this deep sense of joy and happiness. And when my mind would have thoughts that were kind of crazy or self-critical, it's like, oh, those are just, that's my stupid mind just kind of having these thoughts, and I don't necessarily have to believe them. And it's almost like I was seeing life through like a gauze or something, and then that gauze was lifted from my eyes, and then I was able to see things a lot more clearly. And that's kind of, I don't know if I wouldn't say that was completely brought on through my yoga practice, but the yoga kind of sent me in this direction that got me when I got into the deeper aspects of yoga, the meditation, and just trying to be present and practicing a more like an inner exploration. So being quiet and just kind of being open to trying to see myself truthfully inside. That's kind of the growth that happens. So you talked about like how do you get from, like doing a DVD where you're just kind of doing the physical practice. It was a couple of years of getting deeper into the physical practice, and then that leading to meditation, and then leading to working with some teachers who are able to just say to me like, get out of your head and just listen to yourself, do some self-reflection, some self-exploration. And I feel like if you talk about, like, I mentioned that happiness set point because I had read that that people have a general, like, kind of happiness set point. So if you're, like, generally not a happy person, you can't really expect to move to, like, a much happier place.
Okay.
And for me, it was, like, I went from, if it was, like, a scale of 1 to 10, I went from, like, a 2, where I was, like, really unhappy most of the time, to a place where I'm, like, 8 to 10 most of the time now.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like that was like such a gift in my life that I figured out somehow to give myself, or that happened to me, or if you think of it as like I was like watering myself and somehow like blossomed or something, that I had this amazing experience that I feel like there's so many people that are suffering or having trouble in their lives, and if I can spread the message that, hey, it was, happened to me, it's possible for anybody. Okay. And to be able to go from like a not so happy person most of the time to like a person who's in a really good place all the time, that's like an amazing gift that somebody can give themselves through a yoga practice and working on themselves. So that's kind of my journey. And then I was afraid to talk about that for a long time because like I said, I thought people would think that I was crazy, or people wouldn't be able to relate to it. But now I feel like that's kind of one of the most important messages that I can give. So I'm in subtle ways, and sometimes not so subtle ways, I've been trying to be more open about talking about that and sharing that with people.
That's awesome. So now, like, what you're just saying, like, I imagine a few of the people watching this will be like, I need to talk to Chris Brown. I need his guidance. Because, for example, I can talk about myself, like my native language, my Spanish, right? Where I grew up and everything. So every time that I speak to a language, Spanish-speaking person, I feel definitely more comfortable sharing an experience of something because it feels like it's the language of my soul, right? Mm-hmm. And when I switch to English, there's always an accent. There's always something that is just not completely my myself. Yeah. So I can maybe relate that to what you just spoke about. You connected to a way of seeing yourself and understanding yourself that is quite unique, that not there's like a big group of people that can understand that. There's a few that have reached that moment, right? Mm-hmm. And then having that well-being and everything, and then working in offices like Michael Graves and Gensler, that it seems to be a very like high-paced, stressful environment, and dealing with a lot of people that I don't think they think like you, like how you blend those elements together to make it work.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
When I was at Michael Graves, I I didn't talk about it with other people there, but people noticed a change in me.
Okay.
And I would say that it's kind of like...
so this change happened while you were in Graves?
While I was there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2005 was the year when it happened.
Okay.
And that groundedness, I think, really helped the team that I was working with, because particularly during like a charrette, when everyone is working really hard, people get stressed out, people start kind of like bitching at each other, and like just like lots of work with not much sleep, and people get like kind of irritated. And it was kind of like I became the foundation of the team, or like the rock that was just kind of steady and was able to kind of hold everything together, and basically just like, okay, everything's going to be okay. It's all going to work out fine. So it was nice in that, like before that shift happened, I would get caught up in that stress and that kind of, like get caught up in the flavor of the experience, and really start, bitching back at people and participating in that energy. And then it was kind of like my energy shifted so that I was this kind of a foundation that no matter what other people did, it wasn't going to change the way that I was feeling.
Okay.
And so it was nice in that I kind of took that energy away from people. So when people were working with me, I found that people really started saying like, oh, I really enjoy working with Chris, because even when things are challenging, it's like, he's kind of
chill.
He's just chill, and he's going to make let us know that everything's all right. So that worked well at Michael Graves. When I went to Gensler, I felt like it was a different story.
Oh, okay.
In that, at Gensler, I think Gensler is probably the most well-run architecture business in the world, probably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But where at Michael Graves, it was creativity first. There wasn't, the firm made money, but they wanted their employees to be focused on making amazing architecture and art and designing products. Okay. And at Gensler, there was much more of the business focus. Yeah. And I felt like the art side of architecture was kind of not really valued
compromise
there.
A little bit.
And compromise, is a good word for it. And I felt like there wasn't the sense of camaraderie that we had at the office in Princeton. It was more of more cutthroat at Gensler, more like everyone's trying to get ahead and move up in the firm, and there wasn't that sense of community, I felt. Okay. And therefore I felt like my ability to kind of shift people's frame it didn't really happen at Gensler.
So I guess that's the perfect example, talking about language. Uh-huh. So maybe that was very hard to communicate your language to another kind of mindset completely.
Yeah. So it was almost like we were on such different pages. Okay. that there was always a disconnect there, and I wasn't going to change to be more like them, and they just weren't going to change to be more like me. So okay. It just it didn't happen there. So
yeah, it's interesting, Chris, like all the stuff that you're talking about, that the communication between the way you feel and you connect with other people that might have a different mindset. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's hard. But also I can imagine myself, like I have different tools that I use. Maybe they're not, I'd never read them anywhere, but that's are my tools to hide from a stressful situation or something. Sometimes I just get inside the bathroom, close the door, meditate there for a little bit. Something that I call meditate. Just sit down and try to get away from everybody. It's my own moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And then after a few minutes, maybe I go out and sit down on my desk, and that difficult moment maybe dissipates a little bit. Can you share something? I don't know.
So there's whatever works for you can use. Yeah. So I can talk about that, but also whatever you use needs to permeate through the rest of your life. Okay. In order to be really useful. So, for example, you can have, like, my sister likes to garden, and she was talking about how she just gets in that state where she feels a lot more relaxed. She feels really present, and she is just one of the most wound up people you've ever met. And the gardening, like calming. Since she's done gardening, it's like she's back into like a stress mode and go, and so it doesn't really transfer into the rest of her life.
Okay.
So I feel like for people need to just find what tools work for them, but then the important thing is to figure out how to bring it into the rest of your life. So, everybody's going to have ups and downs and traumas and challenging situations in their lives. And so it's what can you use that's going to help you to really be okay with whatever comes up in your life. So, so if people are just starting something or just trying to figure out like how to get to a place that's a little bit better, one of the easiest things that I like to recommend is, and this is the simplest thing that I could think of, is the 3 breath meditation.
Okay.
So all it is you just close your eyes and you pay attention to 3 breaths, like pay really, really close attention. So you just listen to your breaths, and you do that right with your eyes closed for 3 breaths. And then you just open your eyes and you see how you feel.
Yeah.
And you kind of, just evaluate, okay, what did that do? Did it make anything feel different? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But usually for people, they find that they feel a little bit calmer. They find that maybe their heartbeat slowed down just a little bit, and they got to like a little bit of a more calm space.
That's
so
cool.
that's like an easy one, right? And then there's others like in the people that I practice with recommend a Vipassana meditation,
Okay.
which is a 10-day silent retreat. So you go for 10 days, and it's just basically you wake up super early in the morning, and you meditate until the day is over. You go to sleep, and you do it again.
Wow, you have done that?
So so it's like it's very intense.
That's very
right?
intense.
Very confrontational. And people say like, well, it's interesting to think about, right? Something as simple as just sitting down and being quiet for 10 days, right? But it is so hard for people to do.
Mine is it would be very hard for me.
But it's very transformational experience.
Okay.
And what it does is sort of like the 3 breath thing is like the little taste of it. But if you do it for 10 days, and people don't have to do that. I could do other things, right? But that sort of more intense experience can help to get to a place where the transformation is more like lasting. Right.
Okay.
So another way I like to talk about it is like being a surfer. Right. You can be in the ocean and you can be like in a hurricane, and the waves are super big and messed up, and it's like really crazy. Right.
Yeah.
But if you just went down underwater, like even just 20 feet down, right, it's very quiet down there.
Yeah.
And very calm and very peaceful. And the transformation that I experienced in my life and that I'm trying to teach people or show people is that's actually your foundational self. Your deeper self is more like the ocean underneath the waves.
Okay.
Right. So when people have a lot of like something stressful happens in your life or traumatic, like lose a loved one or you get sick or something, that you're caught up in those waves on the surface. But then if you take those breaths and you just try to be present, you realize that there's actually like this deeper sense of self that's really calm and foundational, and it's it's like where you're really at. So even these things happen in life that are crazy. If you can access that foundational self, then it's all going to be all right.
So yeah, Chris, something that I find fascinating, because I don't have the experience and years that you have behind yoga, but one of the things that I found that being involved in art and architecture, there's something so unique when I paint or draw something that I feel is somehow significant to me. It's not a sketch, draw like carefully do a painting or something, that my mind gets completely deep connected. But it's a transition. It's not in the beginning of the painting. In the beginning of the painting, you feel a little bit insecure because you're like testing putting things together. But there's a point when you're painting that you feel that there's no way you're gonna make this bad at all. There's no way to mess it up. Your mind is so connected with your self-being and drawing that you know whatever is coming next is gonna be better and better and better until you end it. And that's a unique feeling that I have with myself.
Yeah.
I'm not a person that can paint every week. I have certain moments that comes to my life by years. Maybe I don't paint by a year, but the next year I paint something else, and I have that moment again that is very special, very unique, but it's not something that is regularly a pattern of my life. So, it's only when I have that unique connection with the hand and I can touch what I'm doing, and that in architecture, there's great feelings too when you're designing in the computer, but I don't never feel like that, that I'm so in charge of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because when you're working on a computer, somehow you're dealing with a machine that somehow the speed of the computer, everything just, there's always something that maybe distracts that connection. And I know that you have painted also as well.
Yeah.
That you might have like some kind of shared experience between your art life and the part of you involved in meditation and yoga, because I feel like there's something there that they need a lot of concentration in both parts.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. And you mentioned painting. It's interesting because painting for me, I don't have the same experience that you do.
Yeah.
Particularly, I when I was teaching myself to paint, I started art kind of later, kind of in conjunction with studying architecture, and I always had a lot of frustration with painting. Like, I just want the damn colors to be like mixed, right? Like, I can see it in my head and I can't get it on the canvas.
Okay.
And I've gotten better at that, but the experience for me is in actually sculpture.
Okay.
So I do, I don't know if I've ever shown you any of my work, but I do wax.
I remember seeing your paintings in the iPads back then.
Yeah. But I actually, I haven't done much recently, but for a while I was really into sculpting in wax, which is Degas. I saw his sculptures of horses, and he used wax to do these fairly small sculptures, but the wax really allows for a lot of detail. And something about it, when I just picked it up and I started with my hands, it was just like I entered this other world. Just hours could pass by, and I would think it's 20 minutes. And it's just like really in that space. And I think that's what, do you know Mr. Rogers, the TV show? Yeah. So he said all creativity comes from silence. And to me, that was like a great way to summarize how I felt when I was sculpting. And I'm imagining that's how you feel when you're painting. It's almost as if everything kind of quiets down and you're just deeply flowing in that creative experience. And to me, that's the same thing that same place that I'm accessing when I meditate. And then now, and that's what I'm talking about is like, can you figure out a way to get to the point where you don't need the painting in order to be in that state? Okay. Right? Is like, for me now, I can be sitting in a client meeting with a client that's not happy, and they're expressing that they're not happy with what I did, right? Yeah. And I can be in that same state that you're in when you're painting. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah,
and I think that's like, I think everybody is capable of that. It's just it's figuring out the tools that will allow you to expand the times when you're in that state. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to encourage
and
people to get to. But I totally, everybody. You mentioned painting, right? For somebody else, it might be sitting on the beach at a sunset, and that brings them into that state. So it's.
But I find also interesting when you are producing or creating, and you're also in that moment that you're so connected with yourself, that it's not only just sitting and meditating, you're also producing something while you're feeling that way.
Yes.
So I feel like that's powerful. And I think I'm going to add that and switch it back to our careers in architecture.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a certain project that in your career that you felt like that you can remember, this project, I truly feel very satisfied. The way I feel and the way I created it.
Yeah.
Because I think both things that I usually have in my life, they connected very well. You know, the part that you have spiritually and also the part of your art and putting together. I don't know if you can add something, a project that might be so.
Yeah, sure. So there was a project in Senegal. There's the old airport site in the center of downtown. They wanted us to design a new quarter for the city. So essentially, a city within a city for 180,000 people to live there, and then to have businesses. Like, so there was a business incubation part of the city. They wanted to have an industrial area. So basically, designing a whole city within the city. And it was maybe 2 years after I'd had this awakening experience that I've been talking about, and I felt like to design an entire city essentially, and to be able to, we went and presented to the president of Senegal, so it was like high-level meetings. Something that would be like, for most people would be a very exciting but challenging experience. And I can remember, sitting at my desk and I had like such incredible demands on my time from, like all the different consultants, like civil engineers, structural engineers. I had a whole team of designers working for me, people who were solar energy experts, and on top of that, one thing I liked about that firm when I was at this was at Michael Graves, was that they didn't want just project managers. They wanted you to keep designing.
Okay.
So I was designing, like laying out this city, while I had all these demands for these other consultants, coming up, asking me questions, like tons of meetings, phone calls and things. And somehow within that, it was the equivalent of you sitting there and painting. It was just an amazing creative experience, as well as being a challenging experience. So I'm not sure if that really answered your question.
No, definitely. But I'm just curious because, what is the time that the two disciplines blend together?
Yeah.
And I was looking to hear what was like a moment that you feel like,
And I think that the potential stress of the situation could kill creativity, right? Definitely. Once you start having all these different consultants that have their idea of how things should look. Landscape designer is going to have a different opinion of maybe what I think the place should look like and how it should feel. So a lot of competing interests, a lot of very intense deadlines, and yet I felt like this crossover from yoga and meditation actually allowed me to continue to express my creativity in a way that was definitely beneficial for both myself and for the project.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris. So I think we have spoken a lot of great things, and one of the things that I want to share with my audience is like Chris also has his own podcast. And I'm going to share all the description below so they can access all your conversations that you also have with a lot of cool, interesting people.
Yeah.
And I have to thank you again. And maybe I need to speak more to you later on to know how can I deal with a few things that are going on. So thank you again, guys, and see you on the next one.
All right, thank you so much, Hector. Appreciate it. Would love to do it again. So anytime.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.